Hello, so I am Ben and this is Emily from MKii. I have been this morning doing some training around kind of health and safety and some practical elements to do with events and that sort of stuff with the MKii team today.
Yes, as Ben says, I'm Emily. I'm from MKii. MKii is a primary school singing, recording and resourcing project.
Yep, and so I've been working with the MKii team for a number of years, doing some of the events in the schools with the kids. And I would love to encourage you, if you are looking for resources for your kids in your church, go and check out the MKii channel with Emily. She's got loads of great YouTube videos that you can go and have a look at. But that's it from us. Have a look at this training and hopefully you'll find it helpful for you in your churches. Okay, so this leads me then on to tapes and which tape should we use when? There are numerous types of tape that we might use in events, and probably most of these you will have in the kit when you come to building a system. These actually here, we've got 5 different types of tapes here. So we've got hazard tape, which we spoke about a minute ago, black and yellow bumblebee stuff. We then have these two. Now these two are probably the most commonly confused types of tapes. Okay, so this is what's called gaff tape, and this is what's called duct tape. And duct tape and gaff tape or gaffer tape are not the same thing. They are 2 different things. So gaff tape, gaffer tape, comes from, there's a role, you might see this on the credits of films, when the credits are going up, you might see somebody listed as the gaffer. And the gaffer is somebody on a film set whose job it is, or one of their jobs is to go around and tape cables down. And so gaffer tape is specifically designed for taping cables to the floor in a way that won't damage the floor, won't damage the cable, but will secure the cables and make sure they're safe and you can walk over them. So that is gaff tape, and it is specifically designed for that purpose. Duct tape is often a lot cheaper. It's also often a lot stickier. It does leave residue, it does damage floors, it does, all those things. It's not to say it should never be used. Duct tape is great for, it's used a lot for things like, I don't know, sticking up a leaky drain pipe or something like that. But if you've got something that, I'm struggling to think of an example right now, but there's something that you want to stick down that shouldn't be moving but is moving and you want to stop it from moving. Let's say a microphone stand that keeps falling over and we want to prop it up and stick it up and stop it from moving, then duct tape would do that. But the downside of it, as I say, is it will leave sort of sticky residue, but if it's an emergency and we need to stick this mic stand up to stop it falling over, duct tape could do that job for you. But it's not a tape for sticking down cables to floors, unless you want to really upset the people whose building it is by damaging their floors when you do it. Okay, so it's worth just getting those. And one of the issues is that you can't necessarily tell the difference just by looking at them. So we could have black duct tape and black gaffer tape. So just kind of by looking at them, you're not necessarily going to know the difference. So again, it will be an ask if this is the right cable. Is this gaffer tape? Should I be using this to stick cables down with? It's just one of the more challenging ones for people. Okay, we then have electrical tape, very standard. Electrical tape is great for a few things. It's good for, it's one of the cheapest cables that we use. So if you need to use it to tape up a cable or something like that, you can do that with this. Fairly inexpensive, doesn't matter too much. This stuff is another form of gaffer tape. So we can put it down on floors and stuff, but this is what we might call a marker tape. So it's great for labeling things up. If we need to put a label on a cable for some reason, we might do that with this. You could also use this to mark around stands. So one of the things that we could do is you could use a marker tape. So if we were talking earlier on about if you have a tripod that extends over a footpath, one of the things we could do is to use some marker tape to actually make a clear kind of pathway through a certain area that might be tricky to navigate. And if we can put a marker down one side to leave that like that, but actually sometimes it can be even more helpful to put it on both sides and actually just clearly make this this is the path where you need to be walking. Just make it super obvious for people that's where you need to be, and try and make sure that we create that separation from the things that we're trying to avoid with some marker tape. Yep.
Is hazard the same as gaffer?
No, so hazard is, sorry, yes, more like a gaffer tape, yes.
It won't leave the residue.
No, so this is safe to put on floors and things like that, yes. Yep.
Two things. So do you have a preference again between, when you're taping cables down,
Mm-hmm.
you can either do it along the cable with a little bit of a lip so you go over, or you do them at distances, short length, that way. Do you have a preference? And also, what do we do about those churches that are slightly older, where, you and I have had that where, this grit or dust or whatever on the floor, you're trying to stick it down and it just absorbs all the dust and is useless.
Yeah.
So which is your preference for how we take down, and what do we do when the floor's dirty?
Two very good questions. So I don't have a preference as to how to stick cables down. There are a few techniques which I can just walk you through quickly. So if we don't have a tangled up cable. So depending on where the cable is, there are a few different things I would do. If it was just running down the side wall, what I might do, it might not need taping at all. If it's just running down a wall joint, there's a cable there, look, we can see that extension lead that's just running down that wall. It's out the way, it's absolutely fine. You don't necessarily need to tape it at all. But if you feel like it may need taping, again, maybe it's a very narrow footpath, there's not a lot of width, and if that cable just creeps out a little bit, it could become a hazard, so we might just want to tack it. So to tack a cable in place, we're just going to take a little tiny piece of tape, that sort of size, and we're going to just put that at a few positions. And what I would actually often do is I would put one at one end, and then one at the other end, and we can just pull it just gently to get it really straight, tack it at the other end, and then we can just tack it a couple of places in the middle, and that is just tacked into place. And if it doesn't need to be walked over or anything like that, that's sufficient. The other thing you can do is to then run a whole length of tape over the top of that. And if it's in an area which is it is right in the middle of a footpath, there is going to be people walking over this, what I would probably do is I would tack it, and then I would fully tape it as well, and we would do both of these two things just to make sure it's really very well stuck down. And then once you've got that, then it's pretty safe for people to walk over the top of that. The other option is you could tack it, and then you could mat it. So you could tack it in place and then stick a mat over the top, and again, that would be a pretty good way to secure a cable. I don't feel like you need to tape a mat down. I think mats are fairly safe on their own. Again, it might depend on the situation. So if you're in a building where the floor is very uneven, we might get a really old stone floor where the stones are just not level at all. It might be that this creates a bit of a lip where there's some unevenness in the floor, and so you then might just think we'll need to tape it. So just be aware, but it's not necessary that if you have put a mat down, it needs to be taped, but there might be occasions where you want to do that as well. Again, I would also say it depends as to how much traffic. If it is the only footpath and every single child is going to walk down it, then yes, maybe. But if there's like 2 or 3 ways and they're all going to be mixing it up, then perhaps not. Any questions? Okay, so the dust thing. This is one of the biggest problems, and there are very few ways to deal with it. Really, you could get a hoover out, and you could try and hoover the dust up to clear that a little bit. Short of that, there are actually 2 things as well. So dust is a big problem. The other one as well can be projects in the winter. If a building gets colder, tape is less sticky when it's cold. So you can try and do things to warm it up. If you've got a hoodie pocket or something, stick the tape in your hoodie pocket and walk around with that for half an hour and just try and warm it up a little bit. That can help, but it's not always the most practical. Sometimes there is just nothing you can do to get that tape to stick. And then the only thing you can do in that instance is maybe see if you can reroute that cable. See if there's a different way we can take that avoids going through the dusty bits. Or it's just a case of matting it as best we can. Again, it might be that we need to put a member of staff on that and just say, hey, can you stand here because we just can't get these cables to stick on this bit. But again, it's all just going to be situational and what you can do in those situations. Maybe rather than putting it to the floor, stick it on the wall. So just lift it up and stick it along the edge of the wall if that's better. Again, just going to depend on what surfaces you've got. But yeah, there are some situations where no matter what you do, you just cannot get that tape to stick. And then you have to deal with that in the best way that you can. Yep.
Slightly off heat. If in the winter the heating is on and you've got very hot
Pipes.
is it still okay to put the wires like that?
Yeah, again, good question. So it's going to be one where you're just going to have to play it by ear, I think, really. If they are like really, really red hot, then I'd probably avoid it. But most cables will take a reasonable amount of heat. But yeah, just play it by ear. Can I just show this one last thing? So it's just super quick. So whenever we come to putting cables away, lift the tape before you lift the cable. Okay, and I'll show you exactly why. So if you lift the cable up when the tape's still attached, the tape detaches itself. What will happen is the tape will wrap itself around the cable, and then it just becomes almost impossible to get that off. Actually, gaff tape does rip fairly easily, so it will come away fairly well. But try to make sure you lift the tape while the cable is still on the floor, and then it won't wrap itself around the cable when you come to lift it away. Great. All done.